violence from that time has morphed itself, moved through the apartheid era. A daily reality in South Africa, in some way or form, has got to do with violence.
Shame, because the city is far away. So the best way to make money is to rob the people who go to the city and come back. But in a settler colonial society, you stay in Khayelitsha for one reason and one reason only, because you are black.
Yes.
And you know that there's no superstructure that lies to you. There's no
My fellow compatriots, welcome to Break It Down, a platform where we get to unravel some of the most complex social, economic, and political issues, making them easy for people to understand. I'm your host, Chidimna Mpofu, and on this platform, we take the complex, we turn it into a conversation. Let's break it down. So, my brother, thank you so much for gracing the platform.
Thank you so much for having me, my brother, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Today, I'm sitting with Lindokuhle Patiwe, a friend of mine, a comrade, and when I approached him about some of the things that we can chat about, we were looking at some of the topics that we can chat about, and we decided that we will look at issues of violence in the country. We'll look at Fees Must Fall and have a reflection on Fees Must Fall and Rhodes Must Fall. We'll talk about the South African political landscape, particularly after the Must Fall era. We'll look at the GNU. And then in closing, of course, we'll discuss some of the policy of choice, but we'll get into that. So for those who don't know Lindokuhle Patiwe, he was one of the key activists and leaders of the Fees Must Fall movement. Not only that, but also even with student leadership in different organizations that he was involved in. And I think in this conversation, we'll have a chat and sort of unpack that.
Yeah.
But to start off, I saw you were reading Richard of the Earth by Frantz Fanon.
Yes. You always have to go back once in a while to Fanon.
Yeah, I'm hoping that at some point in time we can actually have a book review where we get to sit and have to chat about the book, even if it's not Richard of the Earth. Maybe it's I Write What I Like by Biko, any of those, and then we can sit and literally have a review, because I don't think people are doing reviews out there in the form of podcast style. I think we should look into that. But I'm prompted to that because I was reading an article, I just forgot the name of the author. And this author was talking about violence, particularly in South Africa. And this author was tracing the issue of violence in South Africa, talking about the early encounters with the colonizers in South Africa. That encounter had always been violent in many forms. So when we think of violence, people just think violence is stabbing someone or killing someone, but there's violence beyond that in all other aspects. This could be issues of stripping someone's identity, the erosion of someone's ethnicity, and all of those are forms of violence. So this author was talking about how violence from that time has morphed itself, moved through the apartheid era, morphed itself in post-colonial or post-apartheid society, where we now find it in households. We now find it in our communities. You look at the murder stats in this country, something that I was reading also, it says, I think from January to December of 2024, about 26,000 cases, over 26,000 cases of murder were reported. And when I was doing the videos of Israel and Palestine, at that time that I was doing it, the numbers were way lesser. When I was looking at Russia and Ukraine, the numbers were way lesser. So a daily reality in South Africa, in some way or form, has got to do with violence. But the problem is that a lot of our systems, including police, how they look at this violence, they look at it as Lindokuhle attacked so, and therefore that's a situation of violence. But I do believe that there's deeper analysis that could be done in terms of unpacking this violence that we have in our country. I know it's a loaded question, it's a loaded statement, but I'm interested to hear your views about violence in the township, violence in South Africa, these murder stats incorporated, the whole idea that violence is infused in the DNA of what made South Africa, and therefore that violence continues to be inherited from generation to generation.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. And I like the fact that you reference Frantz Fanon. In that book, Wretched of the Earth, the very first chapter concerning violence, if you read another version, is called On Violence. But he makes a very interesting observation, which I think is correct, about how settler colonial societies are governed. In a typical capitalist European society, for people to govern, how government is made and how people are made to submit to power, is through what Marx would say the superstructure, right?
Yeah.
So you have the base and the superstructure. The superstructure is the laws, the taboos, the norms that we do for people to obey.
Yes.
We have good etiquette. We have particular things that people do in society. You have the law, you have legislation, you have religious institutions. And these institutions, all of them combined as a superstructure, in a way guide people to behave in a particular manner.
Yeah.
But Fanon's interesting observation is that in the colonial society, and specifically in a settler colonial society, you don't need the superstructure to govern people. Violence is enough, In a typical, for example, if you think about it, in a typical Western capitalist society, you stay in the ghetto because you are poor, because you didn't get education, and all of these things, right? If you work hard enough, you'll be able to get out. But in a settler colonial society, you stay in Kailicha for one reason and one reason only, because you are black.
Yes.
And you know that there's no superstructure that lies to you. There's no you are black, right?
Yeah.
And the way in which you are controlled is through violence, state violence. There are police everywhere that maintain this order. And as you said earlier on, then this violence, then it morphs itself over time, right? We are cooped into this space, far away from economic activity. So a typical lumpen proletariat, as Marx would call it, will always want to make a way to make money. Mm-hmm. And the best way to make money, shame, because the city is far away. So the best way to make money is to rob the people who go to the city and come back. All you need to do on a Friday evening, stand outside the train station, you'll make your bucks. And once you coop up people in such a space, there is bound to be violence. It's the very structure of South African townships, and any township in a settler colonial country is built on this violence. And it will find itself in different ways. Currently now, I read earlier on that it's so fun. It's as if we live in Colombia. I was thinking about this thing. Somalian spaza shops in Kailicha were shut down for 2 days because the extortionist raised the price. And Amachita who own the spaza shops were like, you know what, guys, we can't pay this. Apparently, yesterday they had a meeting and they came to an agreement that no, the price is not going to be raised, but the extortionist will then
caution it. It's official.
It's official. And it's funny that gangsters are meeting in a formal. Now you have to sit down as if you're talking to a politician, or a civil society group to engage gangsters. In Mthatha, Gift of the Givers apparently was threatened when they were delivering water to people who had just suffered from the disaster there. The mafia, they told them that you cannot give water to these people for free.
Yeah.
Because they're killing our business. So it's this violence that is constantly there. But there's a funny thing about the townships, you know. You had Mascole earlier on. One of the things that Mascole once said, and it's quite interesting, is that we then have this love-hate relationship with the township. Because as violent as it is, right?
Yeah.
For most of us who grew up there, we have, in all of its disastrous makeup, we still have good memories.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
We have the memories, the captain of Proteas.
From Kwalanga.
Yeah, from Kwalanga, you know. Yes. I'm pretty sure he has memories of himself playing cricket on the streets. I also have memories playing some cricket on the streets in Lower Crossroads. This is also where you probably found your first love. This is where you had your first kiss. You probably even remember that corner. You remember that person that you had your first kiss with. And these are memories that you cannot run away from, right? You are a human being. You have memories of your parents, you know, going to town or whatever. They are there. So you have this interesting love-hate relationship in this very, very violent space. Yeah.
So essentially, what tends to happen is that issues of crime, issues of murder in the country tend to be shaped as black-on-black violence. A large number of women are also getting killed. They're getting attacked. A lot of things are happening in our country. That too is happening in situations where the spouse or the boyfriend or even just another black man on the street is the one who's perpetuating that. Mm-hmm. The number of people arrested in prisons full with black men, you know. So it then becomes as if there's a black man problem in this country. I myself, if I'm walking on the streets late at night and I see another black man coming,
you run away.
I see another black man coming, I change my road, Chief.
Exactly.
And if I see that this man is following me to where I'm going, of course, I have the privilege of being a man. And what this privilege means is that I'm able to walk at night. But a woman does not have the privilege to be able to walk at night, which means that their freedom in many ways has been restricted by this system of violence. So I want them to understand what your response possibly is to someone who says, no, it's just black people killing each other. They're doing this to themselves. They're killing their own women. They are the ones that are being arrested. So it's as if it's not a systemic problem. It's a black person problem.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the issue of the status of women in our society, man, is a very sad one. Yeah. Recently, a good friend of mine posted something, and it really hit deep the serious problem that we have. So she posted on Twitter that what she normally does with her husband is that if her friend is going out on a date, first-time date, they will also go in the same restaurant, but sit at a distance to kind of observe and keep her safe, keep the friend safe who's going on a first date. And the first time I read this tweet, I was like, oh, this is so cute and typical of my friend. She's quite a nice woman, and it's very typical of her.
Yeah.
But it quickly dawned on me as I was reading it that, man, this is so deep because statistically speaking, in a funny way, the woman that she says she's protecting in South Africa, statistically speaking, is much more safer. The actual person in this scenario who's in danger is her, my friend.
Can you repeat that?
The actual person who's more in danger is my friend who is with her husband trying to protect a friend.
I see what you mean.
From a stranger.
I see what you mean.
Women in the majority in South Africa die at the hands of their intimate partners and not from strangers. Yes, they die from strangers.
So it's an irony that you've asked the friend to come and protect you, But she's actually in more danger.
She's in more danger
than you are. Purely by the virtue that she's with a man.
Exactly. And she's married to a man. You were now who's going on a date with a stranger. Yes, you are in danger, but statistically speaking, you are in less danger than her.
Yeah.
More than 50% of murders, female murders, don't happen at the hands of strangers. They happen with intimate partners. And this is one of the interesting things I always say, a woman falling in love in South Africa is a very radical act. It's a very radical act, especially if you are a cis-het woman falling in love with a man. It's a very radical act because you are saying that with all of these that's happening, you in a way you're tempting fate, because you know that statistically you might die at the hands of this man, in this person that you claim to love, right? And also claims to love you. But also this, as you say, is happening within this context of the systemic, right?
I was about to take it back.
The systemic violence that is taking place in our country. And what part of the problem with the discourse is that it doesn't deal with this systemic violence. One of the things that I always laugh at, when people talk about GBV, they always say, let's hold each other accountable as men.
Yeah.
And while I think it's true, we must hold each other accountable, but there is, in a way, something that this notion does not deal with conceptually.
It's missing something.
Yeah, because we are also scared of each other.
Yeah.
Like if, for example, I'm walking in a township or anywhere actually, even in the CBD, and I see a woman being beaten by a man, chances are I'm not going to go and stop that.
I used to intervene until lately I was told that a friend of mine has passed who was intervening and he got stabbed himself.
Yeah, you get killed yourself.
Yeah.
The other time, there was a time we're walking in the streets of Durban, CBD, late at night, and then we see this guy beating up this girl. As we walk closer to try and intervene, I saw a gun on his waist, and I was like, this is not my fight. I'd rather call the police. But there's no way. So the problem with the idea to hold each other accountable, it is premised on the dubious notion that I have the power to be able to hold you accountable, right? I can hold you accountable as my friend on your problematic views and teach you.
How about the other dubious notion that it is merely you failing to control yourself as a man by perpetuating this violence without actually a further trace of what is causing this bigger problem that we have amongst black men of violence in society? We're not questioning that. We're just saying, let's hold each other accountable.
Look, in a society where it is bred on violence, as we said earlier on that in a settler colonial society, you do not need a superstructure to keep people in order.
Yeah.
The base is enough. All you need to do is impose violence on them. And there's violence all around. Now, the issue with men is that because the way that we grew up, patriarchy, we tend to be more physically aggressive. Mm-hmm. So we are able to exert our violence in very grotesque ways. But if you go in South Africa, even just go on Twitter, randomly on Twitter, you find people, even women, who'd say, on simple things. You disagree with someone politically, those comments are always there.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there are those who this can just remain a fantasy because they did not grow up being built to physically be aggressive. And there are those who have the power not just be an imaginary thing, to be able to implement it. But what we miss most of the time, as you say correctly, is the underlying superstructural problem that breeds this violence. And for me, that I always say that when we talk about violent men, without removing agency from man, right? Yeah. Because everyone has an agency. We need to be able to also trace people who, part of what patriarchy is a very funny phenomenon, you know. You, as a black man, you live your life thinking that you are superior, right? Because patriarchy, society tells you that you are a man, you're strong.
Yeah.
You go to work, you are called a boy by a small little white kid. And constantly, your entire day, you are treated like a non-human. You come back home, you now want to, because at home, this is the only space where finally you can exert this imagined superiority of patriarchy, which you also know for a fact, deep down, that is not true, right? Because if it was true, you will not be treated in the way that you are treated throughout your day. You then want to exert this, all of these frustrations that you have in the home space. You grumpy, you are quick to respond in violence. If you go to our areas, bruh, people kill each other over smallest of things. The fact that I stepped on your feet, actually, the fact that I simply by mistake spilled your beer. And you can tell that there's no normal person who's going to kill someone simply because the beer was spilled. It is deep painted in anger that is now exposing
patriarchy also has a bigger role to play in this issue, and toxic masculinity.
Exactly, right. And but another thing, this is why it's quite interesting. Why I also say that the situation of women is quite peculiar. Because, you know, as a black man, I know that I'm at a risk of dying anytime. But I can kind of avoid my death. If I avoid going to Echwaleni, if I avoid walking in the streets at night, if I avoid all of those things, right, and I stay at home, my chances of dying, they significantly decrease because now I'm avoiding public engagement. But for a woman, it's precisely by staying at home that invites death to you.
It's like you're not safe wherever you are.
You are wherever you are. You can avoid all of these things. You can avoid walking in the streets at night. You can avoid wearing a mini skirt. You can avoid going to a club. All of these things, and just stay at home.
By virtue of being.
Yeah, but statistically, as we said earlier on, that's where death for many women finds. The woman who goes out and drink at night is much more safer than a woman who's married and is at home, statistically speaking.
Let's take this violence. It's an unfinished topic. I think there's a lot we can unpack on it. But let's move the very same violence to institutions of higher learning in the country. We had Rhodes must fall. We had fees must fall. I believe those movements were also responding to violence that is coming institutionally from the institutions of higher learning, and generally also trying to respond to that violence that we have in our communities, that I want to be educated, and in order for me to be educated, I want to be in a space in South Africa that reflects me as a South African in terms of my identity, in terms of my way of being, and everything. I come from the Val in Johannesburg. I come to the University of Cape Town to study. This is where we meet in our first year. When I get here, there's a whole cultural shock. Everything is new to me. Everyone speaks different. You know, I remember moments of just sitting and watching people and thinking, I thought I could articulate myself. And now I'm realizing that I actually can't articulate myself. What is happening?
Yeah.
You know, let's take me through your early memories of, let's start with Rhodes Must Fall. And let's briefly tell to our audience what Rhodes Must Fall was. Because a lot of people think it was a movement that was fighting for the removal of a statue. But I want people to understand that it was way beyond that. And that the very same movement then gave birth to Fees Must Fall. Fees Must Fall then gave birth to a lot more movements that were within Fees Must Fall. Within Fees Must Fall, there was Trans Collective, there was Patriarchy Must Fall, there was a lot of other movements, hence this phrase called the Must Fall era.
Yes.
Because the movements of that time were all about something must fall, you see. So can you take me through your early memories when you get to the University of Cape Town, whether you've had before Rhodes Must Fall, before you came, or as you arrive?
No, I mean, university was a shock. And this is for someone who also, went to schools in the southern suburbs. No, I was intimately. But still, I don't think my high school experience.
So you were traveling from the township into the southern suburbs?
Yes. That
single day?
Every single day. And that's another violence that I used to be friends even no mama. Kweli basi, early in the morning, 6 a.m., you are with mothers who are going to work in my kitchen. Abu mama bapangela is feminine all over the place. You go to school, and my school used to close at 4:15. So you can imagine, I left my house at around, at least the bus stop was close by, leave the house at around 5:45. You can imagine what time I woke up. Take a 6 a.m. bus, arrive in Claremont around 7 a.m., 7:30, and then you leave school at 4:15. My bus is at 5:15. You can imagine what time I get back home. But in a way, it also, while it was violent, that it was a violence on itself, structural violence, but it also, in a way, I think helped me to avoid a lot of the downside of the township itself. I didn't have the chance. Every time I meet my friends on the weekend, I've missed out on a lot of what's been happening throughout the week. But the point is, I was quite familiar with bourgeois culture and stuff through that experience. But still, coming to university, I remember one of my 2 incidents that were quite funny. In dining hall.
Yeah.
sometimes the food, is not up to, our standards.
Yeah.
And then we'll see it, we're like, hey, I got this food today, man. It's not that great, hey? And then, we all conversating in the conversation. I know the food is not that great. And then randomly, someone is going to say, actually, guys, man, let's just go eat out.
Yes. This is the trends, right?
Yeah. And I'm like,
100%.
No, leaders. Yes, I was saying the food is not great, but I was not saying let's go out.
Because the budget
doesn't allow. You are with people who can literally eat out anytime without any hesitation. Tina, if you want to go out, you have to tell me in a week advance so that I plan, I prepare, And another incident was, I grew up in a culture where if you say let's go out, it is an unsaid rule that it's on you.
100%.
Yeah. You can't say, no, let's go out and then ask me to cough, right? Hey, I'm a bourgeois, let's go out. There's one time I'm like, hey, I don't even want to go out. I'm studying, but I'm a cheater. No, let's go out, man. Let's go out. You're like, okay, cool. Let's go out. We arrive at this place. Yeah, one guy goes up, comes back with a dumpy. Then I'm looking at this guy. From cheater, when's unknown? Yeah, and another one goes out, comes back with a dumpy. Didn't know. So wait, we are all buying ourselves one. And I'm thinking to my mind, hey, my daughter, what if I didn't have money? I was going to be embarrassed, yeah. So now I end up going and getting my own dump.
Yeah.
But these are the small, but there's also another big violence which you alluded to, that you are completely in a foreign land within your own land, right?
Yeah.
And this is what the Rhodes Must Fall movement then was about, is everything you learn from the classroom to the cultural spaces outside of the classroom within the university completely alienates you from where you come from.
Yeah.
If you are a boy like me, interested in philosophy, interested in politics, and interested in ways in which you change the situation, yes, a lower. What you study here has nothing to do with that, right?
Yeah.
Fundo Descartes, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Aristotle, and you're like, yeah, man, Tipos was a lower. How do they connect here, and it's completely not there. So this is what Rhodes Must Fall was all about. How do you decolonize not only the university but society? Because what we realized in Rhodes Must Fall was that the so-called transition into democracy in South Africa did not do what Fanon, as we spoke about Fanon first, put the first last and put the last first.
Yeah.
It continued with the same structural conditions of apartheid and colonialism. And in a Zizekian way, the Rhodes Must Fall was demanding the impossible. The statue was a mere symbolic gesture to this symbolic violence that we're talking about.
Yes.
Because if you talk about Rhodes, Cecil John Rhodes, you hit almost all of the structural violences we face in South Africa. He's one of the face of colonialism. If you talk about, and also remember 2015 is a few years after the Marikana massacre.
Yeah.
We talk about the mining sector in South Africa, I cannot not talk about Cecil John Rhodes. Talk about migrant labor system, you cannot not talk about Cecil John Rhodes. So it became a symbolic center, right?
Yeah.
Land dispossession.
Yeah.
You cannot not mention him. It was a symbolic center of what the movement generally was about. And interestingly, there's been people who say that, and I disagree with this critique, who argue that the protests in universities do not start with the Rhodes Must Fall movement. And I agree, it's true. Other universities, the so-called historically black universities, have been protesting. In South Africa, in South African higher institutions, student protest in the beginning of the year has become a sort of a tradition.
Yeah.
But what this analysis misses is that what those protests were about is fundamentally different from what Rhodes Must Fall was about.
Okay, take us through that.
Rhodes Must Fall was not about access to education necessarily, right? Yes, access to education is important. It was part of the demands. But it was talking not only to universities, but to the structural problem of South Africa. It was calling into question the idea of South Africa itself. If you look at the founding statement of Rhodes Must Fall, we critique the South African Constitution itself.
Yeah.
It was a demand of the impossible. University was just a space in which we found ourselves in, and we can mobilize ourselves around the university space because we are students and we're in the university space. But the university was not the center for attention. It was a locus of enunciation, if you want to say. It was a space in which we were protesting from, but was not the center of our protest.
So essentially the movement was supposed to radiate from outside the institution into society.
Into society.
Because the very same violence
is there, right?
Yeah.
What we're talking about, when we talk about land dispossession, we're talking about our our townships. So this is what Rhodes Must Fall was about. How to restructure South Africa and Africa and the world as a whole in a different way. What you've used to find in previous protests going prior to the Rhodes Must Fall protest was not a critique of South Africa. I mean, it's not to ridicule those movements, but it was not a critique of South Africa. It was a protest to say that we too deserve to go to a higher university. And this is true. But this is what not Rhodes Must Fall was fighting about. And this is why I have a somewhat controversial view of the Must Fall movements. You know, I think that we need to make a conceptual distinction between, there are two Must Fall movements.
Yeah.
There's the Rhodes Must Fall movement and there's the Fizz Must Fall movement. They are related, but they are two completely distinct movements, right? What Fizz Must Fall calls for, and correctly so, access to higher education is true and free of charge. But Fizz Must Fall is not a critique of the entity of South Africa as we find it, right?
So if we summarize it, we are saying that Fizz Must Fall is saying, I need to be educated. Fees must fall. It's in the name. It has a specific target.
Yes.
My target is on fees. My target is on access.
Exactly. And that can be met within the South African framework, right? It just needs a government to simply announce that we are going to provide free education.
Yeah.
But what Rhodes Must Fall was calling for is something that there's no government. It's not you can't write a petition for Rhodes Must Fall.
For government to decolonize society.
Like there's no one that you can send this petition to. There's no actionable demand to Rhodes Must Fall. This is part of the reason why it was quite a difficult movement for the establishment to contain and to make sense of, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing that in the demands you can say, okay, cool, we need to speak to Minister of so and so and so and deal with this thing. Which Fizz Must Fall, on the other hand, you can put down actionable plans.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How much do we need for free education? How much do we pay? How much does it cost to run the higher education system as a whole? Yeah. Is it $1 trillion? Is it $2 billion? Whatever. Okay, cool. How can we source this $2 billion? What can we do to make this money available and put it in? It just needs political will. But it's an actionable demand, which is quite different from Rhodes Must Fall. Rhodes Must Fall is a very it's a demand of the impossible, you know, within a society.
Does this then not disadvantage such a movement because the movement says Rhodes must fall? Others then analyze it to mean the statue of Rhodes must fall. And then when the statue is removed, then the question becomes, comrades, what's next?
What's next?
Because then after the statue is removed, things go dead silent.
Ew.
It then makes others to think the objective of this movement has been achieved and the movement has reached its final stage.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it does come to a problem in that sense. But the idea of the movement was it's an ongoing struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The statue is a mere symbolic gesture. And I think one of the beautiful things that happened, I still don't know anyone who knows the person who did that beautiful intervention at the foot of the statue and painted a shadow. There's a permanent shadow that's painted in there, right?
I've seen that.
I think that intervention was beautiful because it reminds us that while the statue itself may be gone, but the shadow of Rhodes lives on, right? And this was quite understood within the movement, that we are not just fighting. The statue is only a symbolic gesture to what we are talking about, how to decolonize. And one of I think, for example, Andile Mngxitama used to have this debate around whether can you have a decolonized university in a colonial society. And I think that debate is a healthy debate to have. And I think it was something that those of us who within Rhodes Must Fall knew quite well. But the point was that whether you decolonize society first or decolonize university first, currently we find ourselves in a university space. We find ourselves thinking alike, and we are here. We are not going to wait until we find ourselves in a different space for us to be able to start to make it an actionable thing. We can start it here. Yes, it does then have this disadvantage of people looking at the statue only.
Yeah.
But I think, one of the things that I think the Fees Must Fall, one of the reasons why Fees Must Fall collapsed, if I look, for example, from the UCT experience.
Do you think the movement collapsed?
Yeah, I think it collapsed. And I think it collapsed for obvious reasons, right? Because unlike Rhodes Must Fall also, Fees Must Fall was ugalele buying. It's like an ANC. When we ANC was ugalele buying, who's for zonke. Anyone can come
and be part.
Whether you're a communist, whether you're
I was about to ask that
capitalist.
Because a lot of other movements mushroomed either under Fees Must Fall, or they came from wherever they came from and they said, we are part of Fees Must Fall.
Yeah.
It then brought about the conversation about intersectionality, where people then said, no, Fees Must Fall is an intersectional space. It's an intersectional movement. We are all affected by fees, but not only fees. We have these other issues. This could be issues of gender, of sex, of religion, of this and that, and all of them were brought into one basket.
Yeah. Part of the why I find it quite interesting when people talk about intersectionality and look at it from the perspective of Fees Must Fall. One of my observations, and using UCT specifically, I could see that this Fees Must Fall movement is going to hit a dead end quite quickly. And my reasons for this is that there's a lot of people, when we're in Bremner, occupying Bremner, in Rhodes Must Fall.
That's the admin building.
The admin building
of the university executive. Yeah.
And then we called it Azania House. A lot of comrades left. They literally left because they said that they cannot deal with these women who are bringing in our bell hooks, Kimberly Crenshaw, Bona, they want the statue removed, they want to decolonize. They don't know this thing. They left.
Yeah.
Some of my own friends left and said, no, andingenanga nale into. Others left because they said that, for example, Sasko at UCT wrote a statement and said it will no longer form part because the principle of no white people goes against its own non-racialist politics. And in that period, man, I think, Bremner was another space. We used to sit and conversate for hours on end. And sometimes we would
till morning.
We would be stopped by the sun coming out, right? Debating issues. People would literally cry because some of the debates that we're having. I always, to this day, thank some of the feminists who were in that space for introducing me to some of the literature that they did. So the question of gender and intersectionality was quite critical in the Rhodes Must Fall movement. And what happened later on in the year when Fees Must Fall came up, a lot of those guys that I saw running away in the beginning of the year in 2015 when we were doing Rhodes Must Fall, all of a sudden came back. Because now, and I remember the very first meeting at UCT, and I think also as people who of Rhodes Must Fall, we did act a bit petty, and I think it was just Eng at that moment. that meeting unequivocally made it clear that fees must fall is not Rhodes must fall. And the politics that govern Rhodes must fall will not govern fees must fall. Here, we are about fees, and fees affect all of us, black and white.
Was this an attempt to move away from making fees must fall an intersectional space?
I don't think it was deliberate. But inevitably, it ended up doing that. Because now, what then happens is that you find a deeply conservative guy who believes in patriarchy, but is affected by fees.
Yes.
You find a racist Afrikaner whose father was a civil servant of apartheid, but now their pension is running out, who's affected by fees, cannot pay fees. Not all Afrikaners have farms.
Yeah.
You're speaking to them. It affects everyone. These people, without sorting out the politics of that movement, what governs us, you're going to have everyone, and everyone is going to think their views are welcome, because what unites all of us here is the fact that we want fees to fall.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, fees affect everyone, whether they are reactionary or progressive, whether they are queer or cishet.
You're a member of DASO, Student Society, the DA Student Society. You're a member of EFF, Student Society, marching together for one common objective.
Yes, fees.
Which is fees.
But
beyond that, the two do not mix.
There's nothing that unites them beyond that. It was inevitable that such a movement was going to find itself in a clash.
Why was it important for those kind of definitions, intersectionality and all of that to come? Because someone is probably saying, no, it's fees must fall. We just unite and fees must fall. The problem is that when we have such movements where the youth of South Africa itself has as a cry and is saying we have an issue of fees, there then becomes these student political parties that come in and then they take over, they politicize the movement, they now make it about PASMA, about SASCO, about YCL, about DASO, and all these other movements. And because of that, there's now a power struggle among them. And this power struggle is who's going to be speaking, who's going to be singing the most, who then is in the forefront, because now it's appearing as if this movement is led by SASCO, but it's not a SASCO movement. So why do you think it was necessary for all of those discussions to take place, that this is what the space is about?
It's necessary because, I.B. Tabata, in his famous letter to the Youth League, but it's addressed to Mandela, says that it's not enough to organize our people, right? Organizing is easy, but we must foreground what we're organizing our people for, right? And this is what I think was lacking, or it wasn't lacking because it was there, right? What we're organizing our people in fees must fall was fees. But fees is a catch-all phrase. Everyone is affected by it, right? You'd need, for a united movement, for that movement to be united, it needs a much more thorough argument on what it stands for beyond the falling of the fees.
Yeah.
So that it does not become like, how, if you follow the movement now, it's as if the issue of intersectionality was just imposed halfway through, We are all fighting for fees, we are all fine. And then these women just randomly come and then now they talk about intersectionality. We didn't come here for that, Tin. This is what happens when a movement is not a thorough-based conception of what it stands for.
Yeah.
Had you discussed these things earlier on, from the beginning, that we are fighting for fees, but we're not only fighting for fees, we're fighting also against racism, we're fighting against decolonization, and we're fighting against patriarchy. And from the beginning, it is understood that this is what we stand for. Anyone else who does not believe in these things can self-kick out themselves. They decide not to come in or come out. But what happened with Fees Must Fall is that it was a catch-all. We said fees must fall. And then all of a sudden, later on, we're like, no, but now we have patriarchs here. Oh, but now we have racists here. And I saw at UCT, it was quite clear from a long time ago, some of the characters that ran away in Rhodes Must Fall because of these very politics, all of a sudden mushroomed in Fees Must Fall. They found a voice. And you could not kick them out because they are affected by fees. You could kick them out in Rhodes Must Fall. In fact, in that meeting I was telling you about, in a very petty way, Rhodes Must Fall people said, okay, if this is not Rhodes Must Fall, get out of our space. We were using a Rhodes Must Fall hall.
Yeah.
And Fees Must Fall meetings used to happen outside in the grass. I mean, it was a petty response, but it was a showing of this ideological disjuncture.
Yeah.
And it was easy then for government now to respond to Fees Must Fall. There are actionable demands that you can deal with, which with Rhodes Must Fall.
If it remained intertwined, it would have been very difficult.
It was very difficult. Yeah. Because, I mean, how do you respond to decolonized society? What do you do? You're a president. You are a president, yeah. and people are saying decolonize South Africa.
Let's move a bit. It's 10 years later since the movements. I mean, I got to hear that actually Rhodes Must Fall was there way before we even came. It was there, but I think it culminated just before Fees Must Fall also started. So for both the movements, it's 10 years later. Do you think that the movements were impactful? Do you think that the movements had an impact of some sort even to society? I ask this question because in our background conversation a few weeks back when we were chatting, you mentioned something very profound where you were saying it seems as though since the era of the Must Fall movements, there's been sort of like a regressing in terms of politics of race, politics of identity. And we even made an example using the case of the lady who was running for Miss South Africa, Chidimna. We even used that as an example, say the fact that there was an outcry like that, it clearly shows that either people didn't learn or in some way or form we regressed from the progress that these movements were coming about. What's your take on that?
No, I mean, as you said, I hold that view. Some of those who are close to me will know that I've taken a decision personally, for example, to stay out of active public activism and politics. And one of the reasons why I did that is because I've believed that South Africa has rejected our politics. And by our politics, I mean the politics of Rhodes Must Fall.
The politics of PASMA.
Yeah, and the politics of PASMA, I mean, it was quite related.
Yeah.
And and what I'm currently trying to do is to study why they were rejected. I don't know the answer yet, but it is clear to me that they've been rejected.
What are these politics that you speak of?
I mean, politics of centering blackness as the tool of analysis.
Yeah.
One of the beautiful things about Rhodes Must Fall is that it is the first mass-based movement that called out the invisible hand of whiteness in South Africa quite clearly. The ANC, yes, it's a problem, but the ANC is not the enemy. It's just an irritation. But our main enemy is white power, white dominance, and white arrogance, and the preservation of white privilege. There's people who have been saying this, Abo Andile, through SNI, PAC in a small corner there, Azapo in a small corner, the new unity movements here in Cape Town in small corners, Someone calls them boutique political talk shop. They've been saying this is not a problem, but it's only Rhodes Must Fall that takes up this argument and puts it on a national agenda in a mass-based way. And it was accepted by society. I raised the question of Chidimna for example, before we go to Chidimna.
Adechina,
Yeah, I think so. But before we get there, Look at what, for example, Rhodes Must Fall is able to do. Just after Rhodes Must Fall, even the ANC starts talking about white monopoly capital. Whether they were using it as a way to score political points, for me, it's neither here nor there. But it says something, politicians use rhetoric that they know will find favor in society. The fact that they thought that the use of white monopoly capital, whether it's a Bell Pottinger creation or whatever, I don't care. But the point is that the fact that you thought that this rhetoric is going to find resonance, it means that people are starting to talk about these issues.
Yeah.
Now, immediately after that, after everyone through Rhodes Must Fall has agreed that white power structure and white privilege is the main problem in South Africa, what do you find? You find the parachuting of movements like Operation Tutula, Gayton McKenzie's #Mabahambe. From saying that white power structure is a problem to saying that actually the problem is our fellow brothers from across the Limpopo. It is a shift in politics, a shift in understanding of what is the main problem in South Africa. And it seemingly found ground with our people. I was saying the reason why I used Chidimna is that had Chidimna contested, the Chidimna moment, had it happened in 2015, everyone would have come out in support of Chidimna. But 10 years later, everyone distanced themselves.
Do you think it's the same reason that the economic freedom fighters, I know they've refuted this publicly, that it's not the reason why they lost in the elections, but do you think even something as simple as their policy of saying that we should, in fact, just speaking about open borders, just speaking about the fact that foreigners should actually be coming in the country, do you think those are some of the rejections that you speak of?
Yeah, it's precisely that. There are some of the issues that I say. It's clearly that South Africa has taken a conservative shift since then. Look at, for example, just look at the election results.
Yeah.
EFF came down. You had a rise of all of these parties that talk about Mabahambe. All you needed to do in 2024 is to simply say, put South Africans first, and then you're gonna get votes. All you needed to do is to talk about regressive colored nationalism, First Nation, whatever, and you're gonna get votes. But once you talk about white power structure as the main problem, no one listens to you.
Yeah.
But just 10 years ago, people listened and they actually agreed. Because if you look at Rhodes Must Fall was not just a movement in universities.
Yeah.
If you go to the township, our people actually agreed and they understood the argument. Our mothers may maybe have a disagreement in the method, right, that you are doing it. But if you talk to them, they actually agreed. You understand. You follow social media. Everyone was in agreement. People were starting to, even professionals were starting to realize, but they now all of a sudden had a language why they are no longer getting promotions at work. They had a language for it. But no, it's actually structural racism.
Yeah.
But something happened between 2015 and now. And it did not happen in a progressive way. But they do say that generally societies go on it's
like a wave.
A wave, there's a progressive moment and then there's a conservative moment. And I think we are currently in a conservative moment.
Do you think it's an issue of different generations? I sound very old saying different generations, but I'm very young myself. There's a new generation that is more TikTok focused. We create this content to even try to reach to the audience on TikTok. Do you think it's that move of different generation, different culture?
I'm not sure, but I don't really think so, because The people that voted for Keaton Mackenzie are not new young people who are not there in 2015.
Okay.
The people who voted for MK are not new young people who were not there in 2015.
Yeah.
It's the same political subjects who were there in 2015 who agreed with us. But all of a sudden, something has happened in their own mindset that has shifted. It's the same generation that has done this shift. It's not different generations.
Okay, let's take this in terms of heading towards our closing. I want us to do a quick analysis at like the GNU. The GNU came about. We saw all the dynamics and how the GNU came about. So now we want to bring it much more present. What's your take? What's your opinion in ways in which the GNU sort of like came about? The ANC ending up allying itself with this is a coalition between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, but they keep on using the term GNU for some weird reason.
No, I mean, I think the ANC did what the ANC does best. They were cowards. But for me, the biggest disappointment is not the ANC. It's with the left generally in South Africa. When I first heard of the possibility of coalition talks, there were three options, I think, on the table. No, four actually. One is that the ANC goes into a clear coalition with the DA, much more stable, less partners to deal with, but that would have been a definite decision from the ANC to move towards the right.
Yeah.
Or it goes into a coalition with the EFF or the MK, which would have also been quite stable, fewer partners to deal with, but it would have been a clear indication that the ANC is moving towards the left. And then the ANC did not want both these options because, one, a clear outright coalition with the DA would have fundamentally disregarded some of the core principles of what they call themselves to be, right?
Yeah.
It would have been clearly seen as a betrayal. But also, the wound is still too soon. They couldn't go to the EFF and the MK because these guys, I mean, Zuma just murdered them. The 14% that the MK got, if you give it back to the ANC would have won the elections. So they are still wounded.
Yeah.
They don't trust Malema. There was a third option to say, okay, cool. You don't trust these two, but still keep it towards the so-called liberation movements. You can go into coalition with UDM, ATM, PAC, and other smaller parties that are not...
I forgot the exact numbers, but I don't think they made up.
No, they did. I think it was going to just be just over 50%. Okay. If you had removed the DA, removed the EFF and the MK, was even to show you that the numbers added up. Remember the VAT vote in Parliament. It passed even though the DA voted against and the EFF and the MK voted against, but it still passed because those other smaller parties could have made up 50 plus in any way. But the ANC also again did not want to make a clear decision. So what the ANC did, typical of ANC, they took the easiest way out and said, no, Sbabiza bonke.
Is it working?
Before we get to working, is that the problem then with the left, the DA had made a critical mistake going to the election, and that the left failed to actually use against the DA. The DA declared the MK and the EFF enemy number one. Had the EFF and the MK called bluff on the ANC and said, okay, you're calling us all, we are coming, the DA would have self-removed itself from the GNU arrangement.
But if you think about it, the ANC looks like it didn't have a choice here. It didn't have a choice in that MK had demands, And one of their key demands was that we are not negotiating with the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa. The EFF had its own demands, which some might not have been made public yet, but what we hear is that they were very outrageous demands that they were making. There was no way they could sit down and negotiate with both parties.
It's again what I'm saying, but they made strategic blunders as the left. Look, where do you enter who's the president of the ANC? You do not elect ANC people. What I argued that they should have all gone into the GNU.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no way that the DA would have justified being in a coalition with the same people that it had declared enemy number one. The DA would have been removed from that arrangement. It would have removed itself. It would have removed itself. There was no way that the DA was going to be...
the DA would have removed itself.
The DA would have removed itself. There was no way that the DA is going to be in a government with the EFF and MK.
You know why I say I don't think the DA would have removed itself? I don't think the DA cares about a lot of things. The DA just wants to have that little bit of clinching on power with the hope, the thinking that when we've occupied this certain position, we can either get to demonstrate what we are able to do. And they lie using this facade of Cape Town that we can do. It's like now, the talks about Zille possibly becoming the mayor of Joburg is to sell Cape Town.
Yeah.
You know, to look at how successful we can also be able to do it here.
But my point, okay, let's say the DA didn't remove itself.
Yeah.
The DA's power would have been drastically reduced. Drastically. Because now the DA is able to, throw tantrums because it knows that it's a second biggest in this thing. It can throw tantrums now. But if you had MK and the EFF in the GNU, it cannot throw tantrums. They all of a sudden they're no longer one of the big bosses.
Yeah.
The only it was shocking actually. I think the only strategic people from the left was the PAC.
Yes.
In a shocking way. I mean, PAC has not made a strategic decisions in a very long time. This was a very strategic one.
PAC is still there.
It's still there. I mean, and I think it was strategic because had the PAC decided to follow the so-called progressive forum and stayed outside, it would have been drowned. Its voice would have been drowned by the EFF and the MK as an opposition.
Yeah.
It would have been completely drowned. It's like that guy of the Afro guy, Mahlatz.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when was the last time you heard him say anything? Because it's been drowned by anything about... Whenever there's an opposition in parliament...
It's drowned.
We go to the MK, we go to the EFF.
Yeah. Now, let's close it. I see Wendy is busy looking at us.
Oh, yeah.
As we close it, an interesting question that I always ask my guests, and I'm going to continue with it, is to want to know, if there were any policy changes or a policy that you would identify in this country that you feel like needs radical change or needs to be altered in some way or form, which policy would it be for you?
I mean, it's not a policy change, but there's an interesting policy that I've been observing that's about to be introduced that I think would help us a lot in this country. Part of Section 25, there's an injunction in the Constitution that legislation must be made to deal with the redistribution of land in South Africa.
Yes.
There's never been any legislation since then. The Constitution tells us that there should be legislation, but there's never been any legislation. The willing buyer, willing seller is not an act of parliament. It's just a policy, but it's not an act of parliament. The Department of Land Reform and Rural Development finally is currently now working on a policy that is going to deal with that particular issue. And it's something that I'm interested in because it will help us to push the boundaries of land distribution.
Yeah.
Even though we are still doing it, we are dealing with them within this very restrictive liberal constitutional framework of South Africa. But it will allow us to at least push the boundaries in a way. So that is one policy that I'm currently quite passionate about, and I'm looking very closely in how it's going to be implemented and how it's going to develop.
Nah, thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you so much for having
that
me.
next time you can come, we can have these book reviews that we talk of.
Yeah,
because I see you there when you're reading. I'm like, I was just reading that. let's rather come, have a conversation about that and see what insights we could possibly give to the audience. And the audience can also be able to continue the conversation with us in the comment section. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the achievement. Thank you so much.
My fellow compatriots, there you have it. It's a wrap. If it's big, if it's bold, if it's hidden underneath the headlines, on this platform, we take it, we dismantle it, we strip it apart, we break it down. Also stay woke, stay sharp, and make sure that you question every single thing. Don't take things at face value. On this platform, break it down. We are closing. Make sure to follow us on all the social media platforms, and the links are put in the description of this video. Make sure also to subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and let's continue this conversation in the comment section. Thank you for joining us today. Done. Thank you, my brother.